Our guest today, Dr. Tracy Wilen, is a global speaker and media contributor on the impact of technology on work, careers, and women's leadership. I'm Grace Trafton of The Better Part. Please stay tuned and hear what she has to say about women and leadership.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program that encompasses a diverse spectrum of topics important to our community, which we hope will both inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the program.
Dr. Tracy Wilen has authored 11 books, including one titled Women Lead. Her latest book, Employed for Life, 21st Century Career Trends, was released in 2014. We're fortunate to have her as a returning guest on KMTV 15. Welcome again, Tracy.
Thank you, Grace. Thanks so much for having me.
So good to see you here again. And first of all, I want to ask you, what inspired you to write this book, Women Lead?
Well, you know, Grace, let's go back to 2012, right? And I heard a statistic that really was very compelling, that a woman started a business somewhere in the world every 60 seconds. And it made me think, something's changing with women. So I looked up other statistics and trends around that time. It happened to be the Summer Olympics. There were more women from America participating in the Olympics than men. We had the highest number of women in Congress, the highest number of women in the military. We have women exceeding in education and pursuing more advanced degrees than men. So clearly something was different, and I wanted to take a look at it with leadership.
And what were some of your major findings regarding leadership?
So, you know, this was a very interesting study. There were two studies, a survey, which is a quantitative study, and interviews with over 200 women leaders, a qualitative study. And what we found when we surveyed men and women as leaders, very interesting results. We looked at leadership characteristics and attributes, very commonly used in surveys today. Women rated or scored women highest on all 10 characteristics and attributes of modern day leadership.
Is that right?
Very interesting.
Yes.
But here's the kicker. Men did not score men highest
Is
on
that right?
all 10 leadership characteristics and attributes.
That's really surprising.
That's right. So I said maybe we should look at the men a little more. Is it all men or is it certain men? And that's when we had our second interesting finding. Men varied by generation. So boomer men saw a lot of differences. Boomer men today are 53 and up. But Generation X and Y men, which is basically age 53 and younger, were pretty much gender agnostic, which gives you a lot of insights to potentially what's happening in the workforce today.
And did you find other gender or generational differences?
Absolutely. So, of course, as I started to dig into the generation differences, here's what we found. Young women, which is our Generation Y millennials, age 33 and under, are much more confident than women who are boomers, women who are Generation X, and also Generation Y millennial men. So our younger generation of women are very confident. Boomer men were more confident than boomer women, right? So the population of 53 and up. So we did see differences between the generations and genders. And I think these are profound to think about the workforce today, because you do have 3 generations in the workforce, and
Right.
actually we're moving into 4.
Right, right. And do you think that women have to lead like men in order to achieve success?
Well, absolutely not. From our findings, right, what we found is that women are really positioned to be modern day leaders, and we're seeing that as trends, right? Mary Barra, GM, Ursula Brown at Xerox, Meg Whitman, Sheryl Sandberg. So we see that women have moved into leadership positions. We also see that the younger generation, regardless of gender, is pretty much agnostic and very supportive of women in leadership. So you're not going to find the same kind of lens from previous eras. So I think I say yes, of course women are positioned to be leaders.
So according to your study, what were some of the key leadership attributes?
So that's very interesting. So what we found across the board with both genders is that communication skills was the #1 ranked. And communication skills means being able to present, to write, to hold meetings, to negotiate, right, to be able to work with clients. And that was highly rated out of all the leadership skills. The second one across the board with both genders and generations was the ability to organize people to lead large, complex projects, really reflecting on how times have changed at work, that it is about leading teams and it is about having complex projects, and we need leaders to be able to do that.
Now, women have always been known to have good communication skills. So does this give women an advantage?
Well, many women feel yes. We know, again, when you're doing research and surveys, we just look at the data sets. But when I interviewed women, women felt that women were uniquely positioned because of all of their skills and attributes, and that they were really in better positions than men moving forward into the future.
So what about women in negotiating? What did your research find in that area?
So that was actually very interesting because we had conflicting results. So on the survey side between men and women rated men higher in negotiation. But when I did the interviews, overwhelmingly 85% of women interviewed said, no. You want a woman at the table. She is the best negotiator, particularly when discussing complex negotiations. So I went out to a population and said, what's going on? Why would I have conflicting results? Well, it ends up that people, when they hear the word negotiating, they have a perception of haggling for a car or in a bazaar, right? And it's a win-lose. But if you look at the modern research, negotiation is very different. Negotiation is all about collaboration, win-win, and it has shifted quite a bit. So that's where we think that the discrepancy came up, is really around what people perceive the word negotiation to mean.
Maybe Congress can learn something from this.
Absolutely.
So how important are mentors in people's working careers?
So that was another one. Over 94% of our total population, both men and women, felt that mentorship was critical, both on the entrepreneurial side and at the corporate side. So it is important to have people. People do need people to help them. So that's why networking and having support systems are very important. It varied between the corporate side. It was have people inside and outside the firm, have networks above and below you. On the entrepreneurial side, they called it the personal board of advisors. We have moved away, we've shifted away to have that one role model that we follow through life, to having a circle of advisors who will help us through many facets of our life, because careers are so much more complex.
Were there any differences between male and female mentors?
In terms of, well, we didn't actually interview mentors. What the question was about is, are mentors important? And both men and women felt you do need mentors.
You do need them.
The major finding was really that mentorship has changed, that you really can't count on that one person anymore, because that person may leave, that person may shift jobs. But what you're really looking for is to have a number of people advising you.
So were there surprise findings?
Absolutely. So here's an interesting thing. I've been researching for many years. I've looked at women's studies since the early 90s. And I would always ask a question. What influence has your mother had on your life or your career? And on my earlier studies, women would say, none. It's my father, there's a brother, there's an uncle, male figure. In this study, when I interviewed 200 women, the word mom came up over 750 times.
Wow,
so
that's
about
interesting.
3 to 4 times per interview. Mothers are very important to young people, not just women, but also men. They're key role models. And I think that's important as mothers and as daughters.
That's fantastic to hear.
Yes, it is. It warms the heart.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that.
It warms the heart.
Now, do you think the traditional gender roles are softening nowadays?
So the gender roles, it varies, and it's interesting as I see variation all throughout the world and all throughout the United States. But in general, yes, right, we see much more interest of the younger generations of dual participation in raising families, both participating in the workforce, much more interested in lifestyle and having well-rounded lives rather than having dual lives with, and role differentiation. So I guess in general we could say, yes, we are sensing that. More so with the younger generation. They have many more options today than in the past. But we do see more of the blending because let's face it, both parents want to raise their children. And we do need both parents in many places, particularly California, to work, to really afford to live.
Right, right. And women nowadays is still saddled with the caretaker role, right, in many households.
In many. So I have a millennial on my team, and she was like, "What role differentiation?" So I'm the oven, and now he has to take over and do all the activities once the oven's done and the baby's born. So the attitude is completely different. And both the parents are extremely involved with the child. I would say 50-50. So I think the attitudes are shifting with the younger generation. A lot of it depends on how you're raised,
Right.
what kind of cultural nuances
Right.
and norms are passed from families to daughters and sons. But you do see that it isn't just about the mom.
That's really good to hear. That's encouraging.
I get very excited because of sons. You want to have both parents raising your
Right,
sons, and
right.
you want to have both parents influencing your daughter. So I think activity from both is just great.
How about the different type of jobs that women are choosing? Are they choosing more non-traditional female jobs?
So here's the advice I give anyone looking for a job today, college students, trying to make decisions. If your goal is to get ahead and make money, there are industries and positions where you can make money, right? It's going to be in the engineering, it's going to be in medical, it's going to be in data and research. If you're looking for something different, develop a skill that sets you apart. High demand jobs pay well. Jobs that require higher levels of education pay well. So you need to think about that. Jobs that incur more risk pay better than the jobs that don't have more risk, right? I mean, I myself shifted. My first job out of college was in magazines, and I worked at Vogue. Great glamour, doesn't pay very well. I quickly figured out it was the salespeople, the people selling advertising, were the ones who wore the better clothes and the ones who had the better apartments in New York. And I said, what am I going to do? I'm going to shift into a higher risk position because it pays better. So I think each of us have to think about the choices we make in careers and the payoff.
So there seems to be a wage gap in the type of jobs that women choose. Is that right?
Well, there's wage gaps, absolutely, and certain industries are lower paying than other industries. Each of us has the ability to make a choice on what kind of career or job that we'd like to pursue. Now, interesting here in Silicon Valley, many of the companies have grade levels, right? They have different stratifications of salary. My encouragement for people is if you're in a company and you feel like you're stuck, look for opportunities for mobility within the company, but don't forget to look for opportunities outside of the company. And I think a lot of people think that they have to stay in one company forever. But the reality is that people are changing jobs every 4.4 years and 4 months. And really the sweet spot, according to recruiters, is having about 4 to 7 years in a job and then either making a shift inside the firm to build up another skill or making a shift outside and build up management skills or other opportunities or other industry exposure.
It's interesting.
4 years and 4 months.
4 years and 4
Bureau of
months.
Labor Statistics is
Wow.
the average turnover rate now in jobs. In fact, companies average life has reduced. The average company today is only around 15 years. So if you think about it, if you're working for a long time, you will inevitably be moving around to at least 1 or 2 companies, many people 10 plus companies.
Interesting, 10 plus companies.
Oh yeah, sure. You could be working for 50, 60 years today.
Right, right.
You could have about 5 or 6 10-year careers.
Interesting. So you had also written about women in international business. You wrote about women working in China, Japan, Europe, and Mexico, among other countries. Tell me about that.
Sure. So my earliest research was really about my life and what I was doing in my work life, which was I was an American woman in my early 20s traveling overseas on business, representing high-tech firms in the area of manufacturing. Very masculine. Very early days in international business. There were very few women traveling overseas, particularly at that age. I met resistance from many countries because the roles are very different than in the United States. The men worked, the women stayed home. So I had a hard time really establishing credibility, making deals, being able to survive in a manufacturing environment. So I started my research and interviewed hundreds of women who were successful in international business. And here's what, really 3 things came across in every book that I wrote on it, in every research study. Number 1, credibility. At that time, women really needed to have established credibility before they left. And I think that's important because, particularly working here, you have offices overseas and they can create your credibility before you come, whether it was through announcing you or sending a bio, right, your biography in advance, or highlighting some of your uniqueness, your education. So credibility was important, establish it before you go. Number 2 is competence, right, that you have to be competent because traveling overseas is expensive. So the expectation is that if you're representing the firm, you are very competent. So it's important that women stress that whoever you send overseas is competent. Number 3 is confidence. It is an awkward feeling when you move into a masculine environment and you feel outnumbered. You quickly start to question your own confidence. Are you able to perform? And so it's important that you remember you are competent, you are credible, and remain confident so that you can actually execute to the business. And I think those 3 takeaways are very important for no matter who is doing business, gender-wise at this point, overseas.
So do you find that like in countries like China and Japan, it's more challenging?
So it varies, right? So you have, I actually dissected out by country and by age. So when I went to Japan and South Korea, I had the most challenges with men 50 and up, quite interesting. When I went to countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, before it was part of China, and China, it was more neutralized. And I think a lot of that is just the communist influence and men and women working. When I went to places like Mexico, it was much more hierarchy and role differentiation. I mean, I remember meeting an executive in Mexico, and I walked into the room and I said, "How do you do?" And he said, "Well, I'm waiting for Dr. Wilen." And I said, "I am Dr. Wilen." He said, "I don't meet with women."
Oh, my goodness.
So I said, "Well, if you want to meet with Dr. Wilen, this is your only choice today."
Wow.
And so he disgruntled, had to meet with me because it was totally unexpected for him and uncomfortable for him.
And how did that go, that meeting?
It went well. It's quite interesting. I've had a number of situations where there's awkward moments. I remember being in Japan where an executive asked me to get some tea, mistaking me, and because I was the only female at the table, as the likely admin. And so I had to stand up and said, "Great idea. How about somebody go get us some tea?" And I actually remember I moved my seat because I was late to that meeting, and I sat in what I would call the weak seat at the end of the table. And I asked my male counterpart to put me back in the middle, the center, so that people immediately understood that I was leading the meeting.
And not the tea.
And not there
Server.
to serve tea. Exactly. So then I talked to two CEOs, married to each other. They wanted 4 kids. But their definition of success and what they wanted their lifestyle was that one parent would stay home